I want to welcome everyone here to this space. My name is Warren Mabey, and I am the director of the School of Policy Studies, and I'm delighted to see you here today for the Tom and Margie Courchene lecture. Before I start, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that Queen's University is situated on traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples. What I've been told is that this area, Cataraqui, has been a gathering space, a meeting space for time immemorial. This is a place where different nations came together. It was part of different territories over the years. And it was a place where in the spring and summer, nations would gather to hunt, to fish, to talk, to share ideas, to learn from each other. And I like to think that Queen's University builds on that tradition, that we are a place where people from many different places around the world can come together, can learn from each other, and can build new ideas and build a new future for the country. It is important that we recognize the peoples that came before and that are still present here on these lands. The Courchene lecture that we are gathered here today to take part in is generously funded by Tom and Margie Courchene, and I want to take a moment to thank them. Tom Courchene was the director of the School of Policy Studies from 1988 until 1992. He has been a fellow and a distinguished fellow within the school for years now. He has been a mentor to me over the years. I learned a lot from Tom when I first joined the school as a young assistant prof. I've learned a lot from him over the years. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that he has been recognized many times by his peers and by the nation. Most notably, he is an officer of the Order of Canada. He has won the Donner Award twice, or the Donner Prize twice, which is a feat in and of itself. His latest book is called Indigenous Nationals, Canadian Citizens from First Contact to Canada 150 and Beyond. I have a copy of this book for our speaker today that I'm going to pass over. I'll give it to you now. And it's a tremendous book. If you've not had a chance to review it, I strongly recommend that you take a moment to review it. We're very grateful to the Courchenes for the support that they've given to this lecture series over the years. We've had a number of extremely distinguished speakers, including the Right Honourable Paul Martin, former Prime Minister of Canada, the Honourable Jody Wilson-Raybould-Wilson, who is a former Member of Parliament and former representative within a number of different organizations. We've had the Right Honourable Mary Simon, who is the current Governor-General of Canada. And of course, today we add another distinguished speaker to that list, and I'm delighted to welcome Margaret Kenequanash, who is the CEO of Wataynikaneyap Energy. Sorry if I've mispronounced. I've practiced many times before I came up today. Margaret is the CEO of this corporation since 2017. This corporation is dedicated to bringing transmission grid connections to First Nation communities in Northern Ontario. Margaret's taken on a number of different leadership roles throughout her career, including being the first female chief of her First Nation, North Caribou Lake First Nation. So I hope that you will join me in welcoming Margaret up to the podium today. So please join me. Pass over to you.
Miigwech, Wajir, Margaret Kenequanash Indigenous, Agua that Shinabu Nikaswin, no Diniquendago, Bijun do them, Ago Magawi Nano Dagusian, with the Baju Togo Gwen, Awia kakunhamage o nengajan kiwat. Well, jan kiunga lutamang mina jui unchikenda mo ada wane niu yang gan shnabu yang mina ni gini shui dan kim ma kini gi shui dan kim tiang mi gwech tashnent. So I have introduced myself in my English name, which is Margaret Kenequanash, and a given name, Northwestern, them. And I did a small talk to our ancestors to bless the information that I'm going to share with you, as well as to promote that understanding of who we are as Indigenous people of the homeland, including how we must work together. So I have been working on this project for 17 years. This project started way back in 2007, 2008, where our leaders have recognized that we are at the crossroads to bring energy into our area. All our communities are still on diesel generators, and the diesel generators are at capacity. Therefore, is a problem in terms of advancing any issues in the community, as well as concerns in a lot of our areas. So I've worked with this project ever since I used to work at the Shiboma First Nations Council as an executive director at that time, and the priority for energy planning was one of the tasks that I was given to work on, and then I moved over to run the company in 2017. And I've worked many years with our Indigenous people in various capacities. I also have worked as a leader in my home community, where I've learned a lot of things from the teachings of our elders, my parents, which I want to acknowledge, who have passed on to the spirit world. They've set a really high benchmark for me to achieve in my life, which I still haven't achieved, I don't think. And there's a lot of former leaders and current leaders that have mentored me throughout. I can't take credit for everything that I know, because I will acknowledge those that have taught me over the years. And our people have always told us that the experiences and the teachings that we know is a lifelong experience and education and learning that we must have in our lives. And this is where I come from. I have my partner, Tim Lavoie, who's going to introduce himself as well.
Great, thank you, Margaret, and really do appreciate being here to speak with Margaret on behalf of Wataynikaneyap, the power project. My current role is, actually I got a number of roles, but my formal title is Vice President of Corporate Services and Indigenous Relations with FortisOntario. And as you'll find more details, Fortis is a partner in the project, and very happy to be part of that. I've got about 30 years worth of experience in the utility industry, and grew up in Northern Ontario. And part of that experience that I've had is, working with a number of communities. But I met Margaret with one of our team members in the fall of 2014, and we'll go through some of that story. But I've been part of the project since that very beginning, and it's been a very extremely positive project for our company, and one of the things that you'll learn from is that we've got a true partnership in place here. And so my current role is not only with FortisOntario but directly with Wataynikaneyap. So I'm part of the leadership forum that we have with the company. I serve as the corporate secretary for Wataynikaneyap Power company, and so I'm very in inner workings of some of the governance within the organization, as well as a number of leadership functions to support the project. So thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
I heard the director acknowledge the homelands of the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat, and I also am acknowledging our ancestors and the Creator. I'm going to give you a little bit of the project, the need, the vision, the mandate, and the ownership of this Wataynikaneyap. Our elders, we worked with our elders in the area to name the project, and they named it Wataynikaneyap. So that in our language, that means line that lights up. And we added project so people know that this is an energy project. Wataynikaneyap power, I mean, we added power so that people that don't have our language understand that this is an energy project. When we started out, there was two things that our communities wanted. And the two things that they wanted to do is to bring reliable energy into the communities, to connect them to the provincial grid. And as well, the premise of the discussions was based on ownership. There are two drivers that have helped this project. One is based on need, and the other one is vision. When we talk about need, there's a number of things that have happened in our communities when it comes to capacity of the diesel generators. When they're at capacity, there's housing issues that we're dealing with, like a backlog, a huge backlog of housing, because you can't build any new infrastructure in the community. You can't build new houses because you don't have the energy to be able to do it. We have our services that we provide, some of which are very essential, but it almost seems like the communities have to pick and choose what is it that we continue to provide, because it does not allow for any advancement or enhancement of those programs and services because of the limited power. Never mind pursuing economic and development opportunities that our communities would like to look at. As well, we have a number of issues that are, say for instance, when there's a power outage. There's a lot of power outage when you have a diesel generator that run from 2 meg, 4 meg, 6 meg, or 1 meg is the biggest one that we have. And when they're at capacity, there's a lot of outage that happens in the community. As a result, you have food that gets compromised. We have water that gets compromised. You hear a lot of water issues across Canada in terms of the systems that are not up to par. There's reasons why that happens. And as well as shelter. And like I say, there's a backlog of housing, so that affects the shelter in our homelands. And our elders are also impacted. We have a lot of elders that have, need respite care, they need home care, they need, they have different, our people in general have different chronic conditions like cancer, diabetes, illnesses that relate to COPD, and they need to be on oxygen, dialysis machines, they have kidney failures. There's lots of issues that our people are in chronic condition, which are compromised if there's frequent outages in the communities. Therefore, they get relocated to an urban setting, mostly in hospitals. We still have our children that are being mobilized out of the community to go get their education in terms of from grade 10 to 12, high school, and even university. All of us have to move away to obtain our education. And that's a concern because there's health and safety factors that come with that as well. I think you heard about the 7 Feathers, the book that has been written. That's all part of that system in terms of bringing our kids out to education and some of the challenges that we face in bringing our kids to education. So those are some of the key areas. And I mean, the other thing is diesel is not very environmental friendly. It affects the environment, the air, the noise, and is impacting the communities. Transporting diesel with heavy those tankers on the land and the water, there is potential concern for major disaster. Something should happen in the water, including the land. And as you know, our people have a responsibility to take care of the land. So those are some key areas that we've focused on in terms of what the need is. At the same time, the premise of these discussions is ownership. We see a lot of developers that come into our homeland, and then they take what they need to take, they expropriate land, they make money off of our homeland. What do we get out of it? Nothing. Most of the time, it's nothing. And that's a concern. It's time that we set a change in terms of how our First Nation is going to be involved in any development that happens in our homeland, and what is that vision that we need to create to set a solid foundation for our future generation. Because we can't continue to live status quo. It's not acceptable anymore. So as a result, we have developed an ownership where 51% currently is owned by 24 First Nations. And our partner, we went through a process of securing a partner, a transmission partner, over the years, and to a partner that would enable the vision of our people, a partner that would support the ownership of our First Nations in this major transmission utility that we're building. And it's a big project, as you can see from the map. When you fly around up north, it's quite vast region. When you look at it from the east and west, and then moving up north, if you've heard of Anishinaabe Nation, it's 2/3 of Ontario where Anishinaabe Nation is. And majority of the communities that are being connected, there's 17 First Nations that will be connected. They are part of the Anishinaabe area. It's very important to know that part of the decisions and the discussions that have been had with our First Nations is, from an ownership perspective, is setting out expectations of how a company must conduct themselves in the homeland. And we have what we call the guiding principles. And the guiding principles pretty much tells you, actually I'm jumping ahead of my presentation, so I'm gonna get Tim to, I'll talk about the guiding principles and explain what that is, what those expectations are, and how it relates to the governance of our people, but not only that, our relationship and our connection to the land. It's very important to understand this next point I'm going to make. But Tim is going to tell you how important this project is and where we're at today. As of February 11 of this year, which I understand was Tim's birthday, we installed the last tower in the project. On February 28, the last stringing that needed to happen was strung on February 28. So we'll get into the details.
And a little piece of trivia, what I found out last night is the first tower was installed on Margaret's birthday.
That's right.
So, things were meant to be. As Margaret has spoken about it, I'm sure you've looked at the map and thought a little bit about our project. It's a huge project. It's at the time construction started, it was the largest infrastructure project in Canada, and so certainly with that tag, it's certainly the largest infrastructure project ever undertaken by a majority-owned First Nation organization. And it's a project that has a total cost of $1.9 billion, over 1,800 kilometers of transmission line, 22 substations, that will ultimately connect the 17 First Nations. As of this point in time, we're 99% complete. It's a huge undertaking that was started back, as Margaret said, many years ago, and the efforts of building the partnership and then going through all of the required engagement and work with the communities to establish the routing, do all of the necessary approvals required in order to then move into a regulated utility organization, and then ultimately construct the project with a construction, or put it out to market, an EPC contract, and all of the construction, a good portion of the construction was done through the COVID period. So it's added a lot of complexity to it, but we're not that far off. Our original target when we started construction was to have it completed by the end of 2023. And as of right now, we've got 11 First Nations that have been energized, and we've got 2 more connections that will be in the next 2 weeks announced. I'm very sure we're going to hit those targets before the end of April, and have the rest of the communities connected by mid this year. So, what does that look like from a, to give some more statistics on the project? That's 4,230 steel towers installed over that section. There's some wood pole construction to some of the communities as well, and that's 659 of those structures. So it's again a massive project. The map illustrates that over the region, but you can see the inset even on the as Margaret said, the vast area of Ontario that is now have some significant infrastructure in it to support the communities as they grow and seek those other economic opportunities going forward.
The guiding principles, our leaders have established what we call the guiding principles, and it sets out expectations even for Wataynikaneyap contractors and subcontractors of how we conduct ourselves in the homeland. Our people have connection to the land. Through our Creator, the gifts that we're given as Indigenous people of the homeland, we have our way of life, we have our language, we have our Aboriginal treaty rights, we have our inherent rights. Those things will never change because it is who we are. What needs to change is how are we going to make those changes to recognize those things and to respect the people of the homeland? What opportunities are going to be there to help our people move towards a sustainable position in the future to build a future for our future generation? So when our leaders set out the guiding principles, that is the expectations, is that what you do in the homeland, there's a teaching that says you only take what you need. As well, you keep it as you found it. So when you build 120 feet right of way, clearing, installing heavy equipment, helicopters into the whole territory, the guiding principles establishing those expectations, we need to meet those, and how we do that is very important. It calls for recognition and respect for the land, water, animals, our culture, our language. Also that we respect the land, our rights and principles, our way of life. And our way of life is through our ceremonies and our protocols. As we go into each of the homeland and the territory, we acknowledge the people. We recognize the people. Even those, the land keepers I call them, because they're the ones that are going to be directly impacted by this right-of-way that's being built in the homeland. Our communities have asked that they be part of any decision-making and ownership, that I can't go rogue on them. I can't run away with this project not be, so, leave them behind. So we make every effort in terms of our communications, our governance structures that we've set up. How do we ensure that our communities are informed? What is that engagement processes that we've established to make sure that we communicate and engage with our First Nations? So as a result, there's a Wataynikaneyap structure that have been set up, and that's 51% owned by First Nation and 49% by Fortis, along with the other investors. Within the 51%, we've also set up what we call Owagawan Services. And Owagawan Services is owned 100% by First Nations, which then works with Wataynikaneyap in terms of engagement, communication, business readiness, community readiness. What are those opportunities that we need to have in this project? And as well, from the project management, which is FortisOntario, who will build, operate, maintain the project for a period of 25 years until we take over at 100% in 2049. I don't know where I'm going to be in 2049, but I sure hope I'm still alive, because I would like to witness the takeover of a major utility that we built in our homeland, and to take a look at it in terms of what we've done. So meaningful participation and involvement talks about what is it. Our leaders talked about, we don't want to watch the train go by. How can we be part of it, even during the construction period? So we went out and looked at, okay, what are we going to do with that mandate? How are we going to implement so that our First Nations have meaningful participation and involvement? What does that mean exactly? We went and did an assessment for each of the communities to determine what those expectations are. And part of that, it identified what the employment, what the training requirements, as well as business opportunities. And so as of today, we went through that process. Of course, we had to lobby for government funding, because at that time we had no resources to be able to do this on our own. And we worked with a lot of people to make it happen, and set up a training plan. And as Owagawan got set up, they were the ones that would implement the plan, make sure that they delivered on 53 training programs, as well as delivered 630 trainees, which our contractor, Valor, had committed that they would employ. And they had target numbers in terms of what the employment numbers will be, what the training numbers will be, as well as what those business opportunities are going to be for each of the First Nations. So that's the immediate part of what the benefits are going to be for our First Nations. As well, we have we have set out a process of the protocols that we follow for the land keepers, and what are those acknowledgements that we must take to recognize the land keeper and to respect the land keeper for impacting them directly of that right-of-way that has been built in this project. And of course, the ownership aspect. The ownership aspect, as any other utility in Ontario, they earn revenue from owning a utility through the Ontario Energy Board process. It's a very complex process. Let me add that. And how you set that up is very important. Someone asked me earlier today, how the heck are you guys going to pay for this? Well, there's some discussions that we've had with both levels of government, Ontario and Canada. There's some discussions right now. If we were to remain status quo, Canada is spending a lot of money annually to pay for diesel generator. So I always tell the governments that, okay, that's fine. You can keep throwing a bunch of dollars into this system that's not working. And it's a Band-Aid solution. But if you really want to take a look at fixing the problem in the system, we need to look at the long-term vision of what are we going to do to bring reliable energy into the area? How are we going to help advance our people, my people, within the area to be able to do what they need to do in pursuing other opportunities. That doesn't mean we're going to open up the whole north. There's always that concern from our people, you guys are opening up the whole north. Well, no, because every other proponent is responsible to do their duty to consult obligations. Everyone. According to Government of Ontario, as a proponent, they gave you that responsibility called duty to consult. Okay, that doesn't mean you send a big binder to a First Nation and let them read it when they don't have the capacity to be able to do it. They don't have the resources. That's another vision. How are we going to be able to set a level playing field so our people can compete in the same manner as any other business, as any other entity within Canada? Right now we can't, because we're on a funding, annual funding, and you're limited to the criteria and conditions and terms of those funding arrangements that are there. What is that equity that we want to build to be able to compete in the same manner in the rest of Canada with other businesses? That's the vision. At the same time, what are we doing to establish a solid foundation for our future generation? That is the biggest vision that we have. I love talking about this because this is what it's about. This is when you talk about treaties and the sharing and everything else that needs to happen. We haven't done a good job on that. Not from the governments. And this is what we're trying to do in this project, even though a lot of people are saying, well, you're just building transmission lines. Yeah, we are. We're bringing reliable energy. At the same time, there's a vision that has been established which our people want to pursue. So that's what meaningful participation involvement is about. I think this is where we kind of stop, and then we talk about how are we getting there. Do you have anything to add to the partnership aspect?
That's after this one.
Oh, sorry. Okay, now I'm going to tell you a little bit, how did we get here? Well, we started out in 2007. First, it was, we have a current partnership with what we call Musselwhite Mine, who was having lots of problems with their power. And they had lots of power outages, and they were concerned about the production rate and the impacts it was having. So when they come up with and said, you know what, we need to improve this, our First Nations took a position and said, okay, it's not just about you and your production rates. What about our communities? Because what happened is, before this discussion started, 16 years prior to that, our communities were already talking about engagement and energy being a priority in the region. 16 years. We had about 3 different projects that happened in our area that fell through. One was called, oh my goodness, it was called there's a G10, and then there's the Severn River Coalition was the first one. It was a partnership of 10 First Nations that wanted to talk about energy, because energy was one of the things that were becoming a problem. And then G10, 2 communities didn't agree, so they didn't sign on, so it fell through. And then, but you know, there was a lot of discussions that happened, identifying how communities wanted to be engaged, what is it that we need to set out in terms of respecting the homeland and everything else. And then we also had what we call Ontario and Manitoba were doing a project called Central Energy Transmission Initiative. And again, there was discussions about power purchase agreement, getting power from Kanequanash, and there's a 500 AC/DC line that was supposed to come across our territory. And our people stepped up and said, hold on a minute. You may want to build a 500 AC/DC line, but what about our energy needs? Right around that time, there was the IPSP work that Ontario was doing in terms of integrated
System power plant.
Integrated power system planning or something like that.
Yeah.
And they did a report, and the first report that came out for the whole north, it was orange. There was no plan for the orange, for the north. So right around that time, we had received a mandate to start looking at this project. It took 5 years, approximately, after 23 meetings with our First Nations, for our First Nations to agree to work together. That's how long it took. People needed to understand what it is we're doing, what is it that we're talking about here. Even though there was a need for it, we still need to understand what it is, and are we willing to work together? And it took 5 years. At the same time, concurrently, it took about approximately the same amount of time to work with Ontario government just to get ourselves within their long-term energy planning so that we become a priority as a priority project. Our First Nations did not want to be put in the back burner. They said, we don't want to be in the back burner. We want to own this. We want to do this. Within the energy system, within the Ontario regulatory system, in order to own a utility, you have to know, you have to have the money, you have to have the license, and the know-how to build, maintain, and operate. First Nations didn't have any of that. But what First Nations wanted was to own. So there's no ownership within the regulatory system. So we had to figure out the mandate that we were given to bring reliable energy into the community and ownership, and figure out what are we going to do about this. So what did we do? Well, we worked, first we did an expression of interest to look at who's interested. Is there really interest to work on this? There's a lot of work that, kind of pre-work that we did at the beginning to determine if there was a real interest to do this work. We found out there was interest. So there was an interim arrangement that happened, and after 23 versions of master services agreement, one of the partners decided they're going to drop, and that was it. So we had to go back to the drawing board. So we said, okay, we've learned this process, it doesn't work this way. Now we're going to figure out one thing. We don't want these huge binders with fillers that say nothing. What we want is someone who's going to tell us how they're going to enable the vision of our people. So we went to 7 utilities right across Canada. We talked to them about how are you going to enable the vision of our people in ownership of a transmission company. I said, you give me 30 pages to tell me how you're going to do that. And we'll talk. So that's what they did. They gave us 30 pages explaining. There's a lot of various responses. Some said, absolutely not. Others said, well, you know, maybe we can do 50-50. Others said, we'll give you 20% after we're done building. And then we found our partner that said, yes, we're going to enable the vision of the people, and we're going to work with you towards that vision. And that was Fortis. And at that time, they were in partnership with RES as well, who recently has gone back to what they do, which is renewable energy. So we really appreciate our partner for enabling that vision and for working with us, because I always say the things that we've done in this project should be an example to other industry partners to enable the vision of the people in other homelands and other areas. So I think we also had to do a lot of work on the environmental assessment. There was a requirement that we have a full environmental assessment. That took about 5 years before it got approved. A lot of engagement with our people. If I remember the numbers correctly, there's about 2,600 record of engagements that happen with our First Nations. So we go to each of the First Nations. We actually physically go there, and we bring lots of chicken. If you want to make sure that people come out to be participating, well, there's things you gotta bring. Chicken is one of them. And it was very effective. The people love chicken. And, you know, when you get to the community, sometimes, you know, when I come here, everything was all set up. You know, the mics were there, the chairs were there. Sometimes when we got there, there's nothing set up. Sometimes we had to go and cook our own chicken, warm it up to serve it, and set up and everything. That's the kind of engagement that we had to do. We had to be able to make sure that our people participated in the discussions. As we determined the right-of-way, there's a lot of work that we did in determining the right-of-way because there's a major impact to the homeland. There's a lot of concerns. We worked with our land keepers. We also worked with leadership and our people in general to understand the nature of the project, the scope of the project. The initial part of engagement was about ownership. Are people ready to own a major utility that's going to be built in the homeland? And that's also going to impact. People didn't really quite understand that impact until it actually happened. It was almost like a culture shock. People call and say, oh, you didn't see what they did to the land. It was a shock to them. There were people, when we presented our offerings to our land keepers, there were people that shed their tears because they had remorseful feeling about it. However, they also understood that the need is so critical to their communities that they need reliable energy. So what they made me promise is you cannot destroy the land unnecessarily. That's a big promise. It's a big promise. So today, I make sure that our contractors that are working on this project, if they've made a mistake, they need to make amends to our people. That's the protocol that we have within our people and amongst our people. And I like to talk about this for a long time. I don't know what sort of time we have, but I was told, keep in mind, you only have so many minutes. And Tim is going to talk a little bit about the partnership.
Great, thank you, Margaret. It certainly takes a lot of passion and belief to be part of a project like this, but more importantly, as Margaret mentioned, the partners that not only signed up for the vision and belief that this project could be done, but be done in a way that Fortis didn't know much about. And so we approached, and with the First Nations, when we started talking about how this was going to work, we talked about in the terms of true partnership. Now, as much as we've got 51% owned by First Nations and guide and lead the project, we embarked on the project with the understanding that we needed both partners needed each other. As much as Margaret mentioned earlier that First Nations needed that utility expertise, needed some of that regulatory expertise, construction, whoever was going to embark on such a project needed the First Nations, all of the important aspects that Margaret's already mentioned. But so when you think about a true partnership, what are the things that come to your mind when you say there's a strong partnership that exists in any realm? It's looking at equal participation with a partner. Recognizing that partners come to the table with different strengths. That both or many in a partnership with more than one partner is, that those strengths are needed to achieve the outcome or the vision that we talked about. To establish that respect and open to learn and open to express opposing views and achieve that outcome. We're all necessary things to talk about. We're all necessary things to express in how we develop the legal verbiage on the project, and that took a number of months, and there was a lot of very interesting discussions as we put the partnership together, because we were learning about each other and saying, well, we're going to set the course for the next 25 years on how this was going to work, including how we're going to build and operate this thing. And I'm happy to say that, for the most part, I think we got it right. There's some things I think if we were going to write it again, we'd maybe write a little differently, but the foundation of how the partnership works is truly a balance between partners. And when you look at, like I said, the importance, when you think about the First Nations and what was needed to build the project, the knowledge of the homelands that Margaret speaks about, the land keepers that use the land and keep the land throughout the whole footprint of the project, the culture, the protocols, the language, approach to engagement, the approach to business in the region, all are very, very important things that Fortis knew nothing about. At the same time, Fortis brought to the table the utility experience, the operations, the ability to think about construction and to establish a regulated utility and work with government on that basis. This wasn't easy, and I think when I think about it, that's why it's a big success. Nothing is when you embark on something that has a bunch of unknowns, but you have a lot of faith in each other and you lean on each other, you're going to succeed no matter what. And I think the other part of the partnership is that we hold each other accountable to never take no for an answer. And there's been a lot of those opportunities to say we're not going to say no at this point in time. We're going to keep going, and we're going to achieve the greater outcome. And like I say, we're just about built, and I can honestly say that we're building one great organization for the future too, with incorporating a lot of the vision that we talked about.
So I think in conclusion, I want to make a comment about, building a sustainable, renewable, equitable energy in our area and for our future, and using our traditional protocols through ceremony and blessings, as well with any project this magnitude, especially $1.9 billion, there's government compliance requirements, as always. There's lots of reporting. As you know, I don't know if you know, but the Crown, Ontario government, always tells us that there's what they call Crown land, which they own, and our people respectfully always say, no, you don't own that. You took it from us. So this is some of the changes that need to happen within the landscape. Because we're working within the homelands of Treaty 9 and adhesions, Treaty 3 and adhesions, Treaty 5 and adhesions. And there was a true spirit and true intent of our elders in understanding that treaty arrangement. It was like a covenant to them, as promised by the government. We have responsibilities for land management as Anishinaabe and Anishinaabe in the area. We continue to practice those responsibilities and rights. And we also must honor and obey Gayash Dudamuan, which is our practices, our way of life, those things that we've done in the past. Those sacred duties and responsibilities is about Ganawain and Gadaki. It's about protecting our homeland. We must obey and continue to follow through on the original instructions as given to us by the Creator in the first laws that have been established. We have our inherent and our treaty rights. We have our rights, laws, and legal orders that exist independently from the Crown, and they must be honored and obeyed. Anyone that comes into our homeland. Any decision that relates to the homelands must include the rights of the Anishinaabe and Anishinaabe. And they can't ignore it. The rights cannot be ignored because we're there. We're going to be there forever. I plan to be there forever. Maybe I won't be physically, but my children, my grandchildren, I have 2 little grandbabies. One is 8 and one is 3. I often wonder, I look at them and I'm like, what are they going to have in 25 years? What am I going to be leaving for them? And all of us sitting in this room must be visionaries. Not just our people. It has to be everyone that must move forward to make those changes that are required to live in harmony in this homeland. Use of language is very important to us. As you know, we have a very dark history as Indigenous people because of the abuse, because of all of the dark history, residential schools, 60 school, missing murdered Aboriginal woman. But there are reconciliation strategies that must be followed. One of our elders keep telling us that we need to start indigenizing corporate culture. How do we do that? Probably the start is what you're doing today. To have the Courchene speaking series, implementing the discussion and the history of our people, and informing people that are highly educated about the truth, about who we are as Indigenous people. This is the beginning to do that here, even at Queen's University. I wanted to acknowledge that. And I wanted to acknowledge Elder Courchene and his wife for being here and for allowing this to happen and enabling our people once again to share the true story of who we are as Indigenous people. We talk about reporting a lot in our project because there's a lot of reporting requirements. There's the CTI, there's the environmental, there's the Endangered Species Act, there's the archaeology reports, there's all sorts, and permitting, you know? So one of the things that we've noted is that how do we reflect the truth in these reports? Yes, there are regulatory requirements that ask you to report on specific things. But how do we enable, you know, to tell the truth about our First Nations, their jurisdiction, their rights? And that, yes, we acknowledge that we must report because there is $1.9 billion attached to this project. So working towards improving that and how we relate that is very important to our people. And that's part of the reconciliation, is telling the truth about who we are as Indigenous people. Respecting each other, there are ceremonies and blessings that we must follow as part of our protocols. Cultural training, we are integrating cultural training into a lot of the training program that we're doing. We have a cultural training team that works with our trainees to make sure that they are relearning what we're about. And so I just want to say that, as you know, and I think you've seen this right across Canada, that any development that happens in our homeland can happen without the consent of our people. This project is unique in a way that it's being led by our First Nations, but we still have the same responsibilities as any other proponent to engage and also to make sure that people are informed, to make informed decisions about how we're moving along on this project. So as we go into operations, we continue to talk about what that engagement is going to look like, what that communication is going to look like, and how are we going to make sure that we keep dialoguing with the land keepers of the earth that are directly impacted by this project. And I think that's, I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
I think the only thing I would add to that, Margaret, is that, you know, the conclusion here is to say that what are the other things that you say that if you want to call it pushing the limits to, or changing the way that that regulators might view something, or the way that the Indigenous culture is coming in into our organization. I don't think any of it's as fast enough, certainly for our elder advisor, on that you know, the change is probably small compared to the vision that's out there, but I can honestly say there's a number of things that we're very proud of. And you know, I'll just mention a few of them. Is that, you know, as Margaret mentioned earlier, is one of the guiding principles that, you know, no herbicides are going to be used on the project. It's 1,800 kilometers of transmission line. Anyone who's familiar with the business, that's just unheard of. That's still a challenge for it, but we're bought into it. We're believing that we will find a way, and we're hopeful that maybe there's a new way of managing vegetation that is less impactful, that can be used across the globe. Our commitment to employment and training, and the commitment to training, and over 600 candidates that ultimately many worked on the project, and then we're seeing how some of them transition into operations, and then our commitment in terms of the other aspects of the business and bringing those candidates through and committing to that long-term vision where in 25 years we're going to have an organization that is predominantly First Nation organized from the top of the organization down. And then the other thing is coming back to the respect for land and the challenge of working with the land keepers, and as Margaret said, you know, how do we respect this exchange that we're making for the use of this land, and we've got a very a culturally bound protocol that was used for that purpose, and that was introduced in our rate applications with the Ontario Energy Board. It's been accepted as a cost of the utility business, and it's very, very, very different, very unique, and bound by the culture of the region. So, you know, these things might look like small, but in certainly my view, of being worked in the industry for 30 years, where regulators are, this is how the rules work, and this. I mean, oh, that's outside of that. You're not going to get cost recovery on that. Very blunt on how the rules work. There's been a lot of acceptance on how this is going to be different, and so far so good. And so a lot more to go, but you know, we're starting to see those things that in my mind enable this vision in the long run.
With that, miigwech for your time, and as well, I am very honored to have been invited with some of the prestigious peoples that are sitting here in terms of your education levels. I am very thankful, and I think, I don't know if there's any Q&As and how much time we have?
We have some time.
Okay. So before the end of, after the Q&As, we have a few of the presentations that we want to do, or should we do that now, before the Q&As?
Why don't we take a few questions, then we'll do the
Okay.
presentations.
All right.
We have a little bit of time. Yep.
All right.
Great, thank you. So let me just say thank you so much to both of you. You've presented a hopeful and a new way of thinking about these big, complicated, difficult projects. I'm somebody who works on energy systems myself. I've got a few of my students in the room. And when you look across Canada, there's a long list of projects that have struggled to do what you are doing so well. And for me, it's so hopeful to see, that there is a model that can be adopted, that there is an approach that can work. And I'm grateful that you took the time, both of you took the time to be here with us, to talk to us a bit about how to put that together. We do have a little bit of time for questions, and I could probably ask questions the whole time that we have left. But I want to open it up. Are there people that would like to ask questions?
I can just speak up.
Yep, you got one.
Yeah. So my question is about there was a slide. There was a slide up there about 600 people got training, and my question is, what's left behind in terms of skills in the various communities, and what's happening to those skills?
May I take that, Margaret?
How can they be made use of, or how are they made use of?
No, thanks for the question. I mean, I think if we look at our approach to training, we looked at it from a standpoint of trying to meet the needs of the project. Certainly, as recognizing that when you embark on a construction project such as this, I mean, huge amount of person power that's required in order to enable that project to be built in such a short period of time. So we also went on the leap of faith and belief that we would be able to find a contractor that was going to work with a number of candidates that were going to be prepared for that. So we started actually, you probably know the date, Margaret, when we first started our training program, but it was, we signed the construction contract in 2019, and I think with at least 2 years of training ahead of that.
Yeah.
So we knew we needed to meet hit the ground running. So we looked at what are the likelihood of skill sets are going to be required in such a project. So we took a stab at a number of skill sets. We call it line crew ground support program, which really looked at a variety of skills that will be required from from work on the right of way, on the clearing side of things, to the construction related to assembling of steel towers, and then a lot of the beginnings of apprenticeships into line trades for the construction side, which was the most amount of opportunity that would be available on the project. So we embarked on building with a number of partners, building those training programs, and then working through that. And then upon signing the contract, enabling the contractor to be able to pick from that list of skilled trades. Perhaps not skilled trades, but people with skills that would enable work on the project. So we embarked on that, and to a large degree that was very successful. We didn't employ as many as we had hoped through the construction, but having said that, there was a number of opportunities through the business partnerships that were created to support the project as well. Now, a long-term vision on the skilled trade side of things is that our vision is that a lot of these candidates will turn into two opportunities. One would be able to continue on with the current contractor or other contractors in that field to pursue other opportunities as infrastructure gets built. So that stream of opportunity would be there, which we're seeing a number of candidates take that course. And then the second opportunity is through the operations side of the business. So as we're ramping up operations and the skills trades that we need, certainly line trades folks, substation folks, the vegetation management or line clearing maintenance activity without herbicide will take a lot of effort and resource. And so we're looking at ramping up two things on that front, is both skilled labor. So we've started a vegetation management program, and we've got a number of trainees through that. And then also looking at being able to ensure that the contractors that we would hire to do that function will again be picking off that list of skilled trades. So it's really creating a supply, and obviously we're creating a demand. We see a utility business, we see a long-term turnover. So part of our opportunity is looking at turnover in the organization and building those skill sets as time goes on. So the folks that are in apprenticeships now, 10 years from now, we're hoping they're going to be lead hands on crews and moving into management functions. So from a long-term perspective, on the professional side of things, we've worked with some of the local community colleges and universities for the engineering, accounting, other administrative type functions that we would have. There are some positions that are currently filled, but again, we're looking at that from a long-term pathway to employment perspective on those as well. So working more with creating the knowledge at the school level, and then also showing the demand for it in the business from a long-term perspective. So it is a long-term vision and perspective, and we believe with that in mind, that's where that investment in people and ultimately opportunities that it will come. I don't know if that answered the question, but
I think, some of the focus that we did is, there's specific training programs, like the remote cook training program, the environmental monitoring training program, the vegetation management that Tim spoke about, heavy equipment, mechanical training, and then there was an all-women's crew, what is it called now?
line crew grounds.
Line crew grounds training, and so there's quite a few.
The pre-employment.
And then of course the pre-employment focuses on how our people will get their foot in the door, even just to know about how they go about to apply for a job, and what are some of those experiences that they, resume writing and those kind of things. So those kind of support systems were established to enable our people to be part of work. It's challenging because I think in general, right across the board, people don't want to work anymore. That's a challenge in itself. So to try and bring out young people away from their families 2 to 3 weeks at a time that's a challenge as well, because there's some factors there that must be taken into consideration. So, but I think with the training that's been provided and the work that's been done is part of that long-term vision of capacity building. It's not only within the Wataynikaneyap that we build that capacity, but in other areas of work. Like a lot of our communities are still working on building infrastructure, community development. So heavy equipment is always a big job out there. There's different businesses that that provide catering and to a big mine out there, and so there's a lot of people that are trained as remote cooks that have gotten a job over there. So environmental monitoring is part of the work that will be happening in the future, because we have to keep looking after the little bats and the caribou and wolverine. So that's part of the long-term planning, that will need to happen as we do the work in environment. And vegetation management is another thing. So yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, I think I'm gonna need the mic. Thank you for the presentation. It was so informative and inspiring to see how you work together and how the success is built over the years. So on that note, have you thought about how you might mentor other organizations doing the same thing? And then follow up too is, this sounds like a perfect opportunity to teach students as well. So it seems like this could be turned into some kind of major course for students and how to manage this kind of partnership. So sort of a comment, sort of a question.
Do you want that one, Margaret?
How do you turn this opportunity for others to learn?
First on mentoring the other organizations,
Oh, I see.
and then an opportunity for teaching.
Well, I haven't thought of what I'm going to do after I finish this project. But one thing that we've been doing is, part of the work that we do is to keep the project in the public view, and so that people are aware of what's happening. So anytime that we get invited to speak on the project, to inform people about the work that we're doing, a lot of people are very interested in partnership, governance, and just basic overall status update on the project itself. And some of it are interested in the actual financing aspect from the business side of things. So yeah, we go everywhere to talk about this project, and we will continue to do that for as long as it takes. I don't go invite myself to any place other than I only do it by invitation, and yeah, if there was an opportunity ever to change, especially the relationship with the First Nations from a business capacity, even some of the systems and policies that are out there, how we affect change to enable this to happen. If there's a curriculum that could be developed to start looking at this, would be a really good thing, because we need to inform our young ones how to make those changes. And you can't just keep status quo, because if we keep status quo, nothing's ever going to change. What are we going to do to make that change? And part of that is maybe through educational curriculum. I know that one thing that we've done as well is we've started embarking on career fairs with the little ones up in the northern communities, and just to give them, plant a seed in their mind that here's a major infrastructure, here's some opportunities that may present themselves. As you develop your educational goal, maybe you could become a linesman, or something, a consult or an operator. There's so many things that need to happen in operating a major transmission line. You can become an engineer, all sorts of things. And so we've been focusing on engaging our children, giving them information about what those opportunities may present. It's part of that capacity building. What are we gonna do to affect change? And yeah, I've been focusing on universities as well, because I think it's important to educate the mainstream society, especially those going into different professions, to learn about the truth of our Indigenous people and to educate them on that if that's what it takes. And so yeah, thank you for your comment.
Thank you. So I know that there's other questions in the room, but we are getting close to the end, and we do have a small gift that I want to bring forward for our speakers. This is just a token of our appreciation. This is for you, Margaret. Here you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congrats.
For you, Tim. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. We're coming to the end, to the close of our session. You have a presentation?
I have
you
a
want
gift as well.
So why don't I let you do that?
So we would like to do, as part of our protocol, usually if you're invited somewhere, you leave a gift behind. It's it's called. Normally we use bundles, but in this case, it's a small token of appreciation that we are going to present to Thomas Courchene, and as well as his wife will come to you. And just to say miigwech for having us and also allowing us to come and speak in your series. We really appreciate that. Miigwech. Thank you. Where's the other one? Is that, thank you, miigwech. Thanks. Yeah. Thomas? Oh, what about this one? Here you go. We're giving you a blanket so you keep warm for the rest of the winter. You guys.